I once thought this apartment was an escape. After a painful divorce, I just wanted to run away from the old house, where every corner was haunted by memories of an unrealized future with Lisa. This apartment, though small, seemed cozy, a neatly packaged fresh start. The realtor, a woman with a well-practiced smile, called it a steal of a deal. The previous tenant, she explained, lowering her voice as if sharing a shocking secret, had to move out suddenly due to an unexpected family matter in another state. They left almost all the furniture behind. She pointed to the signature lines, her voice full of feigned enthusiasm. "Congratulations on your new home." I was too desperate to notice the warning signs. The apartment was tastefully furnished, a strange mix of mid-century modern pieces and a few antiques that gave it character. And then, I saw it, the antique mirror hanging in the narrow hallway, right between the living room and the bedroom. It was nearly 7 feet tall, its oak frame intricately carved with patterns of vines and vague faces hidden amongst the leaves. It dominated the cramped space, an unavoidable object whenever moving through the apartment. The strangest thing was the glass. It seemed unusually deep, as if the reflection stretched into another space, further than reality. When I asked the realtor about it, she just shrugged. "Oh, that came with the place. The previous tenant insisted we leave it right there. Maybe it's a family heirloom for good luck or something." Her laugh rang out, but there was something forced, nervous about it. I should have realized. The first night, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. My heart was pounding in my chest like it wanted to break free. Something had pulled me from sleep, a sound so faint I initially thought it was just the normal settling of an old building. But no, I knew better. It was knocking. 3 soft, steady, patient knocks, coming from the hallway, coming from the mirror, as if soft knuckles were testing the glass from the other side. Gathering my courage, I stepped into the hallway. It was empty and silent. The mirror reflected only the dim shadows of the opposite room. Nothing. I should have taken it down that night. For the first week, things seemed normal. I unpacked, organized my life, tried to establish new routines. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, the atmosphere in the apartment began to change. The air felt heavier, thicker, especially in the hallway. Passing the mirror required a subtle but unmistakable effort, like pushing through an invisible film, a non-existent cobweb. The temperature began to fluctuate strangely. Some nights I'd wake up drenched in sweat despite the thermostat being set to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Other nights, I'd shiver under 3 thick blankets. 2 weeks after moving in, I saw it for the first time. As I walked back from the kitchen with a cup of coffee, a movement in the mirror out of the corner of my eye caught my attention. Not my own reflection, but something else, a dark shape gliding across the glass, half a second slower than my actual movement. The moment I turned to look directly, only my own pale, familiar face stared back. I told myself it was an optical illusion, caused by the strange lighting in the hallway. But deep down, a primal part of my brain began sounding alarm bells. Something was wrong with that mirror. The knocking returned, no longer confined to the dead of night. Sometimes I'd hear it while cooking dinner or working at my computer. 3 distinct taps, then silence. I asked my neighbor across the hall, a kind-looking middle-aged man. He frowned, looking puzzled. "Knocking? No, I've never heard anything strange. But this building is old, full of weird noises." He asked if I was sleeping okay, if I was stressed about anything. His concern, though genuine, made me doubt myself. Sleep became a battle. I lay awake, straining to hear sounds from the hallway, my body tense with anticipation. When exhaustion finally pulled me under, my dreams were filled with suffocating darkness and distorted reflective surfaces showing things that shouldn't be there. I started researching the building's history. It had been converted from a hotel built in the 1920s. Nothing particularly dark. No mass murders. No tragic suicides that might explain an obvious haunting. I couldn't find any information about the previous tenant. No clue as to why they had left so abruptly. One evening, after 3 whiskeys to steady my nerves, I decided to examine the mirror more closely. The dark oak frame, intricately hand-carved with vines and hidden faces. The glass was unusually thick, with a faint greenish tint at certain angles. When I placed my hand on the surface, instead of the expected coolness, I felt an unnatural warmth, as if it had been sitting in the sun, though the hallway was always dim. With difficulty, I managed to peer into the narrow space between the mirror and the wall, and I saw it, a small inscription, worn but still legible. Videre quod non videtur. My rudimentary Latin translated it as to see what cannot be seen. A chill ran down my spine. A month passed. I began avoiding the hallway whenever possible, taking detours through the apartment, hugging the opposite wall when I had no choice but to pass. I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but that reflective surface. But I still felt it. The sense of being watched from behind the glass grew stronger. Lisa called, worried about my increasingly infrequent and disjointed messages. Her voice sounded distant over the phone. "Are you okay? Are you taking care of yourself?" I reassured her, lying that I was just busy settling in. When she suggested visiting, panic seized my throat. The thought of Lisa in this apartment, walking past that mirror, facing whatever lurked within, it was unbearable. I made excuses, travel plans, work deadlines, until she reluctantly accepted. The truth was, I couldn't let anyone else witness this. Either they would see nothing, confirming I was losing my mind, or worse, they would see what I saw, validating the horror that was slowly consuming me. The incident that pushed me to the edge happened on day 43. I had just returned from a late dinner with colleagues, an event I'd forced myself to attend to maintain a semblance of normalcy. As I stepped into the apartment, I heard it, not the familiar soft knocking, but a loud thump against the mirror, as if a body had been thrown against the glass. The sound reverberated through the empty apartment, making my blood run cold. I stood frozen at the door, keys clutched in my trembling hand. Cold sweat beaded on my forehead. The hallway light began to flicker erratically, casting wild, dancing shadows on the walls. My breathing grew ragged. I forced myself closer to the mirror. The glass was intact, not a single crack. But as I looked at my reflection, something was wrong. Deep within the glass, my reflection maintained a neutral expression, while my real face was contorted in terror. Then, slowly, deliberately, the reflection's lips curved into a smile I wasn't making. I stumbled back, hitting the opposite wall hard. The air knocked from my lungs. I slid down to the floor, my legs giving out. The hallway light steadied. The mirror now showed only my horrified face, mirroring my actual expression. But it was too late. I had seen the disconnect. The proof that the thing living in the glass was more than just a reflection. That night, I slept in my car, parked outside a 24-hour diner, too terrified to go back. At dawn, I made a decision. I couldn't run like the previous tenant. Finances wouldn't allow it. But I couldn't live with the mirror either. I found Dr.
Elanor Weiss online.
an object historian specializing in problematic artifacts. She arrived the next afternoon, a small woman in her 60s, silver-haired, eyes sharp as razors, carrying a leather satchel filled with instruments that looked more suited to exorcism than antique appraisal. She showed no skepticism as I recounted my experiences. She examined the mirror carefully, taking measurements, photographing it, never touching it. As I told her about the shadows, the knocking, the independent reflection, she nodded as if hearing a familiar tale. According to Dr.
Weiss.
Certain objects can become vessels for entities or energies. The Latin inscription suggested the mirror might have been created for scrying, a form of divination that opens doors best left closed. Her explanation, which should have sounded ludicrous, resonated with horrifying truth, confirming what I had sensed. Something had been invited into this mirror long ago, and now it was trying to cross over. She advised against removing or destroying the mirror, warning it could release whatever was contained. Instead, she performed a binding ritual, placing small inscribed stones at each corner of the frame and applying a paste of herbs and oils along the edges. She instructed me to maintain the binding by refreshing the oils regularly and never moving the stones. "The entity is now contained," she said gravely before leaving, "but the binding will weaken over time. My advice is to find another place to live, as soon as possible." That night, the knocking returned, more violent than ever. No longer soft taps, but furious pounding that shook the wall itself. The binding stones vibrated on the floor. The cloying sweetness of the herbal oil couldn't mask an underlying stench of decay emanating from the mirror. I retreated to the bedroom, wedged a chair under the doorknob, huddled under the covers despite the sweltering heat in the apartment. The pounding lasted for hours, occasionally punctuated by the sound of fingernails scraping across glass. Around 2 a.m., a new sound emerged, a low, rhythmic hum that seemed to resonate directly inside my skull. When silence finally fell near dawn, I knew it wasn't surrender, but waiting. The thing in the mirror was gathering strength. I couldn't destroy the mirror. I couldn't leave the apartment immediately, but maybe I could fight its influence. If the mirror was a doorway, perhaps I could keep it closed from my side. Over the next 3 days, I transformed the hallway following Dr. Weiss's instructions and things I found on esoteric websites. I drew protective symbols in charcoal and salt on the walls. I hung iron nails above and beside the mirror. I set up lamps to keep the hallway constantly illuminated at both ends. But the mirror fought back. Light bulbs burned out within hours. Salt lines were inexplicably disturbed. Symbols smeared or shifted when my back was turned. The binding oils evaporated quickly, requiring constant reapplication. Sleep became a memory. I lived on caffeine and adrenaline, jumpy at every sound, every shadow. Work suffered. Friends stopped calling. The mirror was consuming my life. I began to question my own sanity. Last night, everything changed. I woke to absolute silence. All the normal apartment sounds, the refrigerator hum, the heating system, the electrical buzz, had ceased. The hallway was dark despite the lamps I'd installed. The mirror's surface itself was glowing, an eerie, phosphorescent green. As I watched, paralyzed by fear and morbid curiosity, the glass began to ripple like disturbed water. It bulged outward, stretching as if something was pushing from the other side. The wooden frame creaked. The binding stones glowed red-hot. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The glass continued to stretch, the surface protruding several inches. Behind it, I could make out a shape, not my reflection, but a face pressed against the glass, features impossibly distorted, long fingers with too many joints scrabbling, seeking purchase. Then, with a sound like ice cracking on a lake, the glass stopped bulging. The pressure retreated. The binding stones dimmed. The mirror's surface settled back into stillness. And I heard a voice, not with my ears, but echoing directly in my mind. 3 words, clear and terrifying. Soon. The lights flickered back on. The normal sounds of the apartment resumed. The binding had nearly failed. It was breaking through. This morning, I decided, I won't run. I've researched places connected to mirrors and reflective surfaces. Wells, caves, still pools of water. Places where the veil between worlds might be thinner. I found a likely spot a few hours' drive from the city. An abandoned quarry flooded with groundwater, forming a perfectly still lake between sheer rock faces. Tonight, when the moon is at its peak, I will take the mirror there, not to destroy it, but to offer it an alternative pathway. If Dr. Weiss is right, if entities need an invitation, then I will offer one. Not into our world through the hallway mirror, but from the mirror into somewhere else, somewhere desolate. I have prepared the symbols, the words, drawn from texts I don't fully understand. I know the risks. It might not take the offer. It might turn its fury on me. But I cannot live in fear, waiting for the glass to break. As I write these final lines, the knocking has started again. Not on the glass anymore, but from within the walls, as if it's testing the limits of its prison. I feel its anticipation. It's hungry. Tonight, one way or another, it ends. Either I succeed in redirecting this entity, or I don't. I leave this record, just in case I don't return. If you're reading this, and you happen to find an antique mirror with a carved oak frame in your new home, do what I should have done from the start. Take it down. Immediately.